Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. I am primarily a portrait photographer. That's kind of the core of most of what I do. I also teach at a couple of schools here. I teach at New York Film Academy and Pratt as well. I'm a big fan of portraits. I also do a bit of street stuff as well, and travel stuff, which is very personal, which I'm kind of going to go through. I do find it to be a little bit more interesting when I see the talks that are geared a bit more toward the why versus the how. So I'm going to kind of try to move through that and talk about the why my stuff looks how it does, or how I approach photography, or any of that kind of stuff. I've been working for about 10 years or so, very seriously, I guess. It was something I grew up in. I grew up with video primarily, as that's actually what I wanted to do. So I'm showing some very bad early images. This is one of the first times I really tried to play around with photography. This was Yellowstone. I was 14 or 15, and I had one of those Kodak instant panorama cameras, and this is from that. It's really interesting, I think, to look back at very early work you do, and you usually see these very early sensibilities that you've got in your later work, and I find that's incredibly fascinating, because I had absolutely no idea what good photography was, who was doing interesting work, or people I should be aware of. And that's what I find is kind of cool about this, is you have certain sensibilities that you're aware of, delayed perception or minimalism. I like to hide things in the corners of the frames. Or, in the next image, reflections. I'm always fascinated by looking through things at other things, and these are not particularly good images by any means. This is the Sears Tower in Chicago. But there's a certain purity to very early work when you're not aware of the medium and what other people are doing within it and the history of it. And that's kind of what I really tend to appreciate about looking at early work, despite the fact that all of it frustrates me photographically. This is another terrible image. This is, I think I used like an 8 megapixel HP digital camera to make a composite of my friend. This is absolutely terrible. But I started on Photoshop at a pretty early age. We had it at my middle school. I think it was like Photoshop 4, which was a good 19 years ago or so. And that was actually something that I started playing around with. I started using Photoshop long before I picked up a camera, at least in any kind of capacity. This was a composite, and I was really kind of obsessed with making movies, and I think there's a bit of cinema with the panorama and that kind of viewpoint. That was something that I definitely had early on. I also worked backstage at the theater growing up. I was on a theater scholarship when I was in school, when I was in college. And we did behind the scenes, we did building, lighting, all that kind of stuff. And that kind of stuff definitely carried through that flair for the theatricality. But between that and a parent that was an extreme perfectionist, you kind of want to hone in, and by proxy perfectionist, which is what I became, you start to really work toward polishing that single still image. And I initially went to school. I grew up in Florida. I moved to Florida when I was about 4 years old. My parents did. I didn't really have much say-so in the matter. I moved to Florida when I was about 4, and I grew up, and I really wanted to make movies. And I really watched way too many movies, way more than any kid really should. And that's what I wanted to do, but I was okay. I was never really great at it, so I decided I want to be a journalist. So I went to school for broadcast journalism, and then I did that, and I was okay at it, but I figured that I didn't want to do that anymore. So right after I graduated college, I got one of kind of the most important gifts I think I've ever gotten, which was a digital camera. And this is actually my first digital camera, my first camera that I owned. I'd shot on, we had an AE-1 growing up, which was incredibly intimidating. I shot on those little instant cameras and a few things here or there. But right after I graduated college, my dad was living over in Germany at the time, so we went to go visit him, and I wanted a camera. I wanted my first camera, and it was this little 8-megapixel Canon Rebel XT with 8 autofocus points. It shot 3 frames a second. It was amazing. And I shot this frame about 6 days after I got my first camera. This was in Neuschwanstein Castle in Germany. And it was absolute pure luck, absolute pure. I had no idea what I was doing. This was, I had about as much skill in getting this shot as I did in those panorama Kodak instant images. I kind of just pushed the button. I pointed it and pushed the button. I thought it was very fancy because I could twist and zoom. Most of those images frustrate me. I think I've got about half a dozen that aren't slanted like a Michael Bay movie. I had this weird thing that I thought that looked great, and it frustrates me to this day. I got a couple of shots out of it. This is one that I happen to really like. This is another one taken at the Louvre, again about a week or so after. I always like the idea. I'm not a very confrontational street photographer, although there's definitely a time and a place. Sometimes I will, sometimes I'll absolutely get in people's face. I'm usually more about the scene, more about the context of the image. And I love the idea of putting people within that. This is kind of something that again, we talked about those early sensibilities. This is something that I still do pretty commonly to this day. I find the shot, I compose it, and I wait for someone to walk through it. Now, I came back to Florida, and there was this thing called Model Mayhem that was starting, and that was actually something that enabled me to really work on photography. Because when you live in Florida, you think the only way you can make money at photography, if that is what you are so inclined to do ultimately, and I thought that was, I was bartending and waiting tables at the time. I said the only money I thought I could make in photography was by being a fashion photographer. So I started doing fashion photography, and I did that for several years. I lived in Central Florida for a few years, and then I ultimately moved to South Florida. I worked in the Miami market for several years, where I assisted a great photographer named Navid, which was incredibly difficult. It was incredibly trying, but incredibly valuable. Learning experience. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I learned so much from the assisting experience, and I encourage anyone who really wants to go into the business of photography to really assist and kind of hone your chops that way. So I shot lots of what Miami considers fashion, which was we shot a lot of swim, we shot a lot of catalog, commercial work. This is some of that. Some more of that. That's a composite shot down there, catalog stuff, editorials, more of that kind of stuff. I shot that for a while, and while I was down there, I had the opportunity when I was assisting. We traveled in many places. We did Europe and in the Middle East, and for me, one of the greatest experiences of the whole time was I was able to travel. And I think the best traveling experience was we took about a month. We drove from LA to Miami, and we kind of zigzagged all across the country and got to kind of go through the American West. And that was one of those things that really transplanted this bug in me to move. This was an image that I took in White Sands National Monument, which was in New Mexico, I believe. This is a yucca alata, I think is what it's called. Really kind of a unique flower out there. This was outside, I believe it was Page, Arizona. This is a Navajo cemetery. We just randomly kind of stumbled upon this. And I thought it was kind of fascinating, a bit sad. I think like 300 Navajo veterans are buried in this cemetery. And it was kind of fascinating and like I said, a bit sad because of the fact that the state of the cemetery is a bit It's a bit disheveled. It's not really well manicured, well taken care of. This kind of goes all the way back to like the code talkers in World War II. Code talkers, World War II. I think this is as far back as it goes. Very, 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 very stark contrast to kind of what you usually associate a military cemetery to. This was taken in Antelope Canyon. This is my homage to Peter Lick. Several years later, I had the opportunity to go to Thailand, which was one of the best experiences of my life. I went to Thailand and went to Cambodia with my girlfriend. And this is actually taken in Cambodia. This is the Angkor Wat Temple. And it's the largest religious site in the world. And all of these children run around, and as soon as you get out of the car, they try to sell you souvenirs. It's very heartbreaking. It's pretty common they do that. The sad part of it is that many of them forego school and education because they're of more value to their family selling souvenir postcards, 10 for $1, to tourists. What I do love about the kids there is they have this tremendous sense of eye contact, and I really love the work of Steve McCurry, who is one of my favorite travel photographers, and there is this great sense of eye contact with a lot of his subjects. And in a place like Thailand, you don't have to try. They really just engage you right off the bat. It's really pretty incredible. Just chasing this kid down the street. It was great. This is outside of a Buddhist temple. While we were there, we were visiting my girlfriend's cousin in a little town called Nampatam, which is, she teaches English to kids in the Peace Corps. And we had with us our backpacks, and inside the backpacks I actually brought a light and a light modifier and a light stand and batteries. And part of this project was I wanted to photograph some kids at the school where she teaches. So this kid was just really fantastic. We photographed them, I think, right after they were playing soccer. That's why they're all sweaty. This is the railway slums. These are the Makassan slums. This is in Bangkok. What's kind of fascinating about this neighborhood is that it's not necessarily a place for people who are down on their luck. It is also, there's a lot of middle class people who also live there just because they can't find other accommodations. They're not, the person who was taking us through, he said they're not necessarily financially challenged. They're a lot of times just location challenged. A lot of these places have like satellite dishes and stuff. They just happen to live right next to active rail tracks, and it's a bit loud, but they don't pay rent, and they get to buy these plots of land for anywhere from about $600 to a few $1,000s. This is a kitchen in that neighborhood that is about 4 feet from active tracks, 3 or 4 feet from active tracks. Like I said, I do a lot of street work. I do love photographing in New York. It's one of my favorite kind of hobbies to do here, is just pick a neighborhood and maybe spend an hour where you might walk past a block in a few seconds. And I think a lot of people have photographed New York very well over the years. Elliot Erwitt is a great example of that. I'm hugely inspired by Saul Leiter, who does really beautiful color work in New York. And I think New York is this beautiful reflection of kind of whatever you want it to be in street photography. I think some people see it as a very happy place. Some people see it as a very sad place. I think it's interesting to reflect back on our own work in that I photographed New York in different ways at different times. And sometimes it's happy and sometimes it's a bit more lonely. Grand Central is one of my favorite places to photograph. Sometimes you get like these really beautiful beams of light that just come through. I think I've shot in Grand Central at least 20 times. I've never been able to find that light right in the middle again. I think it must only happen for about a day out of the year, and you need like a really clear day. I also think that sometimes street photography in New York can kind of come across as a bit of a love letter. Some of these are for me very much. Because New York can be a very unforgiving place because it doesn't care about you. But it can also really, it kind of has these moments where every once in a while it just winks at you. This was actually an image I took a couple of weeks ago up in Garrison. My girlfriend and I just got a little dog, so this is part of documenting his whole life. I'm also, I like to play around with the idea of seeing how different pieces of equipment kind of change the way you approach shooting. I've got, a small little Fuji camera that I like for street stuff. This was shot on my iPhone. And then I've also been shooting some stuff more recently with the big Pentax 645Z, which changes the way you kind of approach street photography as well. Sometimes, with like a little Fuji, it's incredibly quick, and you can pop in and it's silent and no one sees you and you can get right in people's faces and be on your way. And then sometimes you pull out a camera and it's this big and there's no hiding from it. This is an image I shot of the Verizon building, window washers on the Verizon building. This is in MoMA. Again, I like the people. It's more stuff in Grand Central. There is. This was mentioned earlier, but I think one of the most important things about street photography and why I think it translates so well to so much other work is it's based so much in presence and acknowledging what is there and what is around and being quick and being on your feet. They're kind of two sides of the same coin, two sides of the coin that I really enjoy about photography. This is so quick, and it's all about being observant and seeing things that you're not really in control of. And then I also really love doing portraiture, which is the complete opposite. And I think when you really get a great portrait, it's all about being able to capture those little moments within being able to really build a much more complex framework of an image. This was the Staten Island Ferry looking over the side. Times Square. This one reminded me of On the Road, the McCarthy novel. It was right after a really heavy snowfall, and we went out very early to photograph Washington Square in the snow. This was taken about a year before. Obviously, having different moods for when you're photographing. This was marching up Fifth Avenue with the protesters. This is actually going down the road, and it was obviously, stopping traffic. This is actually a double-decker bus stocked with photojournalists shooting down on you, is what that was. This was taken during the blackout, during Sandy. And I was living in Brooklyn at the time. We had to walk across the bridge and all the way down, and then we walked back. I think we did about 10 miles on foot that day. That's the Chrysler Building way off in the background. It was really, really strange. It was really eerie. I've never quite seen anything like it. It reminded me of trick-or-treating as a kid, when you just had lots of people out, but we lived in a neighborhood that wasn't necessarily super well lit, so there was just no lights everywhere. The only lights were cop cars that were every block or so lighting up everything, or you'd have an occasional restaurant that was powered by generator. It was really, really strange. You can kind of see the people walking around. I like this shot because the firefighter's in shorts. There's an awning that came down during the blackout. This is pretty recent. This was the ticker tape parade for the women's national soccer team the other day. This was actually some street work that I shot on the medium format camera, which, like I said, it's this big, so it's not inconspicuous in the least bit. It's a very different animal, photographing with a larger camera, photographing on the street. It's actually really interesting. So there have only been 2 ticker tape parades this decade so far. There were 3 last decade. And of those 5, 2 were for the Yankees, 2 were for the Giants, and this one was for the women's national team. So not necessarily something we get to see every day. So the aftermath. Then they clean it up in like an hour. It's crazy. So, like Brian, I'm a huge fan of the Met. The Met is maybe one of my favorite things in New York. I think if I ever left, it would be the one thing that I would maybe miss the most. It's one of my favorite places to go, and one of my favorite things to do there, besides go to the 18th century paintings, is I'm really fascinated by the way in which people observe art. And I like to go take pictures of people taking pictures of art. Because you rarely have people who will walk up to a painting and they'll stare. They walk up, they'll look at it for a second and move on. Or there is this really fascinating thing that happens where people collect snapshots of paintings and they just walk around and they go click and they walk to the next one, they click. It's like they're collecting it. And I promise you it never looks as good, but nonetheless, people don't look at the painting. They just want to collect the image or get a picture of themselves in front of the image. And being there a lot, I also thought it was interesting that as much as and as great as it is to appreciate what we have, what stood the test of time, I'm also fascinated by just the concept of what's missing. And so this is part of a project where I go through and I photograph what's broken or what's missing. Yeah.
Is there some restriction against, like they don't want you taking photos in the museum, or is that?
You're not allowed to use a selfie stick, which I'm fine with. The more we can ban those, the better. You're not allowed to use flash.
But otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen people, set up in the Met with like tripods and stuff, which I think is a bit much, but yeah. There's no problem with photography, just not flashes. Or the sticks. This was actually taken at the Cloisters, which is a really cool museum. So from that, I also, am really fascinated by like Impressionism. So this is actually this is I think the next three were like shot on my phone, but this is a pedestrian crosswalk. This is the sunset, and this is texting on the subway. So I think that kind of work is very important to me. I don't really do anything with it other than put it on my Instagram. But I do think there is a lot of those sensibilities that keep me fresh and keep us fresh, shooting constantly. And I try to push that into my portrait work. Now, my portrait work is inspired by two things. One, I really love Dutch painting, Caravaggio, Rembrandt, Vermeer, all those guys. Huge fans of that. And when I was in college, I took a class that was a media class, or it was an English class. I really don't remember. But the core of the class was about translating old stories into new mediums. And we see this time and time again. You look at, they repurpose Shakespeare for plot points and shows and movies, and it happens all the time. And I'm fascinated by the idea of retranslating old methods into new mediums. So this comes from my love of classical painting. And I wanted to try to recreate that in photography, and I found out that it was quite a bit harder than I thought it was. The painters, especially Rembrandt, he painted with something called God's light, or heavenly light, and it was usually like sunset through a window. And it was all about finding this light that I found truly interesting, because as much as I like to think cerebrally about the work, I'm also a bit of a nerd. I'm a bit of a geek in that I really love cameras and toys and lights and all that kind of stuff. So I really wanted to try to find a type of light that was interesting to me. And this was really the first image for me that I think that really whole idea started to click. And I was really trying to craft light that was... Do you ever walk down the street in New York and light bounces off a building and you get that reflected sunlight, but then right as you're leaving it, the edge of that, so it's the edge of bounced sunlight, that was the light I was trying to get. And I was trying to recreate that in the studio, and I had to think. It took me a long time to kind of think about what I was trying to do, where it's a light that's both hard and soft at the same time. And I always thought, like, for me, that was the most beautiful light. And I think part of that is that it is a rare light. It's kind of like we appreciate diamonds so much because it is such a rare thing. And that light for me is just, it's such an unusually specific light that only happens at certain times of day in certain places. So I wanted to see if I could figure out how to recreate that. And so all of this is kind of an exercise in trying to create that light with traditional style of painting and kind of updating that in a more modern portrait. And this was kind of the first image for me that really connected. I always say that he looks like, he's Jon Snow light. He looks like Jon Snow to me. This I actually shot like 2 hours ago, 3 hours ago. And then sometimes I really will branch off a little bit. So this is just a regular soft light, but what I liked about this image is like the lips and the eyes, those are all hand painted. I painted that all in manually, just to kind of give it a little bit more of a painterly feel. This is Dave, who was here last week. This for me was an image, I saw this guy and he reminded me so much of that Karsh photo of Hemingway. And so this was my homage to Karsh's Hemingway. This is actually natural light. I shot this on the Staten Island ferry. He had no idea I took that picture, or he did and didn't say anything. This is a photo of my mom, and I just wanted to put that in there. So this is kind of the last set of images that I'm going to show. This is a photo I took of my grandfather. I took it a short time before he passed away. And I'm really fortunate that I was able to get these photos when I did, and he sat for me, and what I really think is important about these photos for me is not just that they're a record, because that's to me a large part of why I photograph, is because my memory is going, and I find that photography is a way for me to remember better. I'm able to remember visually. I can remember faces, but the facts are very tricky. So, like the details. So, the more I photograph, it's almost like a little bit of exercise, almost like a catharsis for what it is I want to remember. And I remember this day more vividly than almost any other memory I have of him. And this project led to other projects because, I think what I believe the ultimate takeaway is to find inspiration or creativity wherever you can. This ultimately led to a couple other shots that I happen to love, and a couple other projects that have absolutely nothing to do with anything else that I do. But when we start to become complacent in our work, I think the work starts to get boring. So I think the more we try to push ourselves and the more we try to fuel ourselves creatively, the better off we'll be in the long run. So I took this photograph, and he was a Southern Baptist minister, and that was a very defining characteristic of him. And the last time I saw him, he had on this really tremendous belt buckle. That was he's a Southern, very Southern. It was George Washington crossing the Delaware on a belt buckle. It was amazing. And I thought I wanted to photograph it. And right before he left, he took it off and he gave it to me. He said, something to remember your grandfather by. And I was very touched by that. He passed away, I think, probably about 6 months later, I think is what it was, something like that. It may have been a little bit longer, maybe 8-10 months later. But it was a relatively short time later. That was the last time I saw him. And the morning he passed away, this is at the church that he spent a lot of his final time in. Everyone was kind of congregating, and I just went off walking, and I found this room, and I think it was a great little punctuation for me, I think, with the story, and how I felt, and it was just very peaceful, and there's just this great light coming in. Now, he ended up. I asked to photograph his belt buckles. That was a project, and this is what I talk about. Finding creativity, and I don't have this up really. I think anywhere except I maybe put a couple of them up online. So I asked for his belt buckles, and that led to a project, and I started to photograph his belt buckles, and I used them. They're actually photographed on some old books that were my girlfriend's father's, and it was kind of like this shared love of people we've lost, and kind of combining them together, things that they both loved, and it's very meaningful for me. So this was one of them, which I really liked the whole graphic sensibility of it, and here was another one. It's still something that's really in the works. I've only finished a couple of them, but it's all about doing what fulfills you and what makes you happy and what stimulates you and what gives you growth. So that's really my piece. I think we're kind of running out of time. I'm happy to take questions if anyone has any questions.
Any questions? No? Here's one right here.
Just curious, the iPhone photo that you took.
Yeah.
Was it the regular camera?
Yeah.
And how's that process?
I think I use Snapseed. Snapseed is my go-to photo editing app. It's fantastic.
The lighting that you were trying to capture, how did you eventually be able to do it?
Oh, for the portraits?
Yes.
It's a hard light soft fill. There's lots of flags and reflectors and other stuff as well, but it's the core of it is the balance between a hard key and a soft fill.
It's a strobe, it's not a constant light.
A shot with strobes, yeah.
Anyone else? Questions?
I was just curious, I was born in South Miami, I went for the broadcast journalism major. Where did you go to school?
I went to UCF.
And where in Florida did you start when you were 4?
I grew up in a town called Winter Haven, which is right between Orlando and Tampa. It's Disney country. Yeah.
All right, anyone else? Everyone give it up for Chris Knight.
Thank you.